Hello and welcome to this controversial Resident Evil game tier listing. My name is Reese.
And my name is Bane.
Oh, good to have you here, Bane, my boy. How's it going?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm good, my friend. I am good. So, yes, controversially, we have got all the mainline games in the Resident Evil series, and we're going to put them into tiers. So we've got S, A, B, C, D, E, and F. So, yeah, without further ado, let's get on with this controversial list of Resident Evil games. We're going to start with the granddad of survival horror, Resident Evil 1, the original one on PlayStation. Bane, where are you listing it?
I would have to go with A, mate. For its time, an absolutely amazing game. It foretold the story and laid the foundations for everything that was to come.
Fair enough. Short and sweet. I'm going to have to completely disagree with this one, and I'm going to have to go with D, mostly because I agree with what you're saying on the terms that it is where it started, but I would argue that it is not something that is playable in today's climate, especially with the remakes. I think unless you've got nostalgia, you're probably never going to touch this one. And the remake, which we'll talk about later, is just 10 times better. So I'm going to go with D. I'll give you the first point, then we'll go B. We'll go B on the original run, yeah? All right, so that is a good start on the original Resident Evil. So yeah, Resident Evil 2, we're going to stay on the original PlayStation 1. And this time, let's discuss Resident Evil 2. So I'm going to go first this time. Bane, Resident Evil 2, head and shoulders better than the original. It just is, I think. So that's why I think I said the other one was a D, because this is where it started, but 2 just was so much better. I enjoyed 2. I never played it, but watched my brother play it. I enjoyed 2 a lot. So I'm going to have to give this one a C, just because the tank controls are not good. Like, I don't care what anyone says. Nostalgia tells you that the tank controls are good, because they're absolutely dreadful nowadays. I did play this like 5 or 6 years ago, and it was awful. But in terms of Resident Evil, again, I'm going to have to go with C. So, Bane, over to you.
I'll be honest, exactly the same points on as what you've just said, really. I wouldn't let that discredit the game any. I would personally go A for this one. It was the best of its time.
Ooh, so that's easy, that one. Is it not? Is that B? Straight away B. There's no arguing on that one. In the middle. Right, moving on to the original Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. Bane, you start us off. Where do you think this is ranked?
It's going to go high, mate. This was the one. This is the first one that I played prior to watching my dad play it. The other 2, it was always a case of watching my dad play it. I'd play them whilst he was out at work, behind his back. Resi 3 was the first time that I got behind the controller for the first time, and I had nightmares that Nemesis was following me for a very long time. There was so many different bits. It was great to see Jill back, and looking deeper into Umbrella. I'm going to go with A.
Oh, okay. So, out of the 3, this was the first one I properly played myself when I was a kid. I finished it as well when I was a kid. It's the first one I ever completed as a kid, realistically. I will say I enjoyed playing it and getting chased by the Nemesis. I enjoyed it more than 2. But looking back, I'm not quite sure I should have played it again, because I didn't enjoy it when I was an adult. But that, again, if we're just sitting on nostalgia, would I play this one again? No, probably not. So for that only, I don't know. I'm going to have to go with C, I think, in comparison to what
we're meeting in B again.
Yeah, so we are meeting in B again. So yeah, I'd go C on this one, just because it's not, I don't know, it's not bad. If I can't see myself playing it, there's no way I can give it more than just a pass. Do you know what I mean? Controversially, I'm going to start on Resident Evil 4. So Resident Evil 4 to me is a steaming pile of shite. I didn't play it when I was younger. I played it when I was older, and it's just terrible. This is the problem that I have with Resident Evil. If you didn't play it when you were a kid, so these games, especially on the PS1, are all based on nostalgia. Like, it's hard for Resident Evil fans to critically look at these games and go, they're good. Like, the Resident Evil were good for the time. Resident Evil 4 was good for its time. It's just unplayable. And I think this is probably the last one that we look at now that is unplayable, realistically. The shooting's terrible. His relationship with the girl in it, not Sherry, it's the other one in it. Ashley. The relationship with Ashley is weird at the best of times. It's just not good. I understand how it revolutionized gaming. I get that, but that's not what we're doing today. We're tearing these Resident Evil games, and for me, this is D. It just feels like a poor man's Gears of War. As I played it, because obviously I played it after Gears of War, after Army of Two. It just feels like a peasant's version of that. So I never got on with this. So yeah, to me it's like D. I've got no nostalgia connected to this, and it's just not a very good game. I can't see myself ever really playing it again, to be fair. So yeah, I'm going to go D, and I'm going to hand it over to you, Bane.
I completed this game probably about 50 times on the GameCube.
But that proves my point, though. That proves my point. It's just nostalgia. Like if you can't get out of nostalgia, then everything's better through the eyes of a child. You're a kid, for God's sake. Do you know what I mean? It's a tough one.
I think it's hard because all of my memories that are attached to this were me playing it at the time of it coming out.
Correct.
Whereas obviously you're going to come at it from a comparative mindset.
Yeah, 100%.
You're comparing it. So Army of Two, Gears of War, they all came after this. That was like 360 style.
Yeah.
At which point we were on PS2, which was competing with an Xbox One, and even an Xbox One. The original Xbox.
Yeah, the first one. Yeah.
You're talking Halo. The best thing they could bring out at the time was first-person shooters. This was the first game ever to have that over-the-shoulder perspective. Story was amazing. There was a lot going for Resident Evil 4. However, there was a lot of annoyance there. There was a lot of frustration when it came to Ashley, the voice acting behind it. There was a lot of repetitive lines that were said that just got quite frustrating. Yeah. And that is probably what did it for me more than anything else. And like, if I had the option in the game settings to mute it, I would.
Yeah.
I'd go B, personally.
Okay, so we'll meet on the middle and go C. I went D and you went B. I understand why people like it because it was revolutionary. It's just to look at it subjectively, I don't know. I just think every time I've heard that saying, it starts with I loved it as a kid, and you're like, come on. Now we're going into last of the originals, maybe? No, I'm not quite sure when this one was released. I think this was GameCube. It was GameCube, I think. So Resident Evil 0.
So this was the second one that was released on the GameCube. It was released just after the Resident Evil 1 remake and basically foretold the events of 1. Amazing game. It introduced a tag system. So you would go around with your partner and you'd be able to switch between characters throughout the story. One of them having the ability to use this item, one of them having the ability to use this. It was a new system prior to Army of Two, which again is a great example there.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed this game. There was some good post-game content to it as well. I would probably go for B.
I didn't necessarily enjoy it. I think it was good to know where it started. I think they backtracked a little bit. Obviously, with the guy you play in it, you never see him again. So I think there was backtracking a little bit. But yeah, to me, this is like a D, I think.
Meet and C?
Yeah, we have to meet and see, I guess, then, yeah. So, speaking of remasters, Resident Evil, the remaster of the original one. So I'll start with this one because I actually want to sing this one's praises. And actually, with the remakes, I'm not like one of them people who are just like, oh, remakes are the best thing since sliced bread. But this one does everything better than the original one. There's nothing in here that makes me want to go back to the original Resident Evil. One, they've changed the dialogue. The dialogue in the first one was some of the most shocking dialogue you've ever seen in any video game. I don't care how much you like Resident Evil or anything like that. It's look out, Jill! You're nearly a Jill sandwich. It's like fuck off. It's absolute dog shit. So they changed the beginning scene to CGI, which was cheesy as fuck in the original one. So there's just nothing worse about this than the original one, and for that reason I actually enjoy playing this one more. But again, it's tank controls. Even though they did change the view a little bit, it's still tank controls. So I would say this one for me would be a B.
Well, I mean, come on, we've been gaming together for many years now, mate. You know me, I love a bit of cheese. My heart is with the original. Like, yeah, okay, some of the like, it's Forrest. You're almost a Jill sandwich. Maybe you, the master of unlocking. Blah 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 blah. I think there was a lot more going to it. In all honesty, it scratched beneath the surface a little more than what the original did. I would argue A.
Okay, right. Okay, I know I went B, but I'll agree with A on this one because I just can't put it lower than the original one. I know. Obviously, like you said, nostalgia, but where I'm concerned, nostalgia's not enough. Nostalgia's not. It's not relevant. Not only one of the best Resident Evil games, but probably one of the best video games of all times. Let's talk about the Resident Evil 2 remake.
It changed everything, in all honesty. It improved on its predecessor. It improved on the original leaps and bounds. It told the exact same story, but in so much of a different way. This is why everyone says, oh, well, everything could benefit from a remake. This is the game where people think that, because this was such a good job of it. And I would not hear a bad thing about this game. So I would land on S.
I'm going to have to completely agree. With my personal take on Resident Evil 2, the only thing that I would say was bad about Resident Evil 2 was the fact that Mr. X was so fucking annoying that I never actually I've never done a speedrun on this because he shits me up every time, and I can't get over that anxiety, to be deadly honest. He's so much scarier in the remake than he is in the original. There's just not, again, because of this now, there's no point in ever going back to the PS1 version of Resident Evil 2, unless, of course, you want to experience nostalgia. Again, this is the game. This is the game now where you go, like you said, you want to do a remake, cool. Well, sorry, but it is in comparison to Resident Evil 2, and that, for me, is why it tears up, not only as one of the best Resident Evil games of all the times, but on genuinely one of the best video games. If you want to experience a horror game, just get Resi 2, mate. You don't need to have to play anything else. Just get Resi 2. Moving on to Resident Evil 3, the remake. Now, we said originally we both played Resident Evil Nemesis, and we now know there was a lot cut out of Resident Evil 3. But one thing I did enjoy with this is its replay value. With it being so short, I know people didn't like the fact that it was super short, and to be honest, as a full release, that annoyed me more. It should have been DLC's Resident Evil 2, but it's not a bad game. It's really not a bad game. I know people like it's linear, but I don't really care about that. Most games are linear, so I'm not really fussed. But it's nothing in comparison to its second one, and I think that's the problem. It came out too close to Resident Evil 2. They rushed this one out. They stuck that weird Resistance game with it, and it's just nothing special, but it's nothing bad. But I do think it's better than the likes of Resident Evil 4, just because it's playable, if not at the very least. So I'm going to put this in B. I think
there is 2, maybe 3 games in this entire list that I would probably never play again. This is one of them.
Ooh.
It felt like a cheapened Resident Evil.
Ooh.
Like, between the content that it cut, they took away the decision making that the original was so well known for, the ability to be able to change the story. Nemesis never felt scary in this.
Yeah.
It just felt like that boss that just reoccurs every now and then. But it was so predictable. Even though it wasn't a full-on remake, because there are so many areas of this game that you explored that you didn't in the original, you just had that sense about you. You knew exactly when them was going to appear. There were so many sure-tell ways of knowing what was going to happen, when it was going to happen. It just took... It took the horror away.
Yeah, I agree with that.
At which point, survival. And it wasn't that hard to survive in it. Having completed this on the second to hardest difficulty that you have to unlock, I did that quite rapid, in all honesty. So, for me, this is one of the worst in the list. I would probably go D.
Oh, okay. So I went B, so we're going to have to go C and meet in the middle. So, next one is Resident Evil 5. Do you want to take this one away?
Story-wise, yeah, okay, it was great. It was sort of like the ending of the whole sort of Redfield saga that we'd seen through 1 and Code Veronica. The game itself, so obviously it was working on sort of a tag team mechanic that just did not work at all. The AI was so stupid, and the voice acting was absolutely ridiculous. That there was nothing that it brought that the previous games hadn't. There was nothing unique about it. Because Resident Evil 0 had already sort of done it. A co-op Resident Evil 0 would have been a better Resident Evil 5 easily.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I'd go D.
D, right, okay. My biggest problem is that Resident Evil 5 is a bang average co-op shooter game. There are way better games out there that you can play if you want to play a co-op shooter. Go play A Way Out, Gears of War, like I said earlier. They're so much better. Army of Two, both of them are better. Kane and Lynch is better. Resident Evil 5 not only fails as a Resident Evil game, but most of all, it fails as a co-op shooter. That's what pisses me off about this game. I like the fact that it carries on the storyline and we finally get rid of Wesker. I get it, he was the biggest villain in the series, but it was good to finally get him gone and give way to different villains in the series. But Resident Evil 5 is nothing special. It's really not. And if this wasn't called Resident Evil insert name, this would be lost to time. It's lucky that we have Chris on steroids who's punching boulders, because if not, this would be a half-assed, shitty action game that people mocked and put in lists by it being so bad. So I think Resident Evil, the name, actually helped this game. So I would say this is probably an E for me. It's just not very good. Like, it's not a very good game. It's not a good Resident Evil game, and it's not a very good shooting game. So I'd say E. So you said D, and I said E. So what do you want to go?
I will meet you down there.
Okay, E. It's just not... There's just nothing about that game that goes, Yay, let's play that again. Next up is Resident Evil 6. I'll take this one away first because Resident Evil 6 to me is a part in time that Resident Evil needed. Resident Evil 4, as controversial as this may be, did take us away from horror and did start adding some bullshit stuff into Resident Evil. It started adding action into Resident Evil and it added stupid QuickTime events that 5 carried on with, and that 6 just ran with more than it ever should have done. This was because of the new direction of Resident Evils. I get it. The tank stuff and the survival horror had its day. 4, 5, and 6 were action games, but Resident Evil 6 took it too far. Saying that, though, again, I don't think this is as bad as 5. It's funner than 5. It's more goofy than 5, but at least it's cheesy and it's not scared of being cheesy in the same way Tekken's cheesy. So I'm going to give this a big fat D. So yeah, I'm going to give it a D. I'm going to give it the big fat D. Bane, what are you giving it, my friend?
In all honesty, I agree with a lot of the points you made. Story-wise, it was great. Gameplay-wise, it was nothing different really to what 5 brought already.
I thought it was smoother. I thought it was smoother than 5.
It was definitely smoother, but it was still lacking in comparison to games that had come before it as well.
Yeah, I'd agree.
So, yeah, I'd meet you in D.
Yeah. So together we can rub our Ds together and put Resident Evil 6 right where it belongs. So I'm going to start this one off again, if you don't mind, because I feel quite passionately about 7, Biohazard. A lot of people don't like this because it's an isolated story. Now, Resident Evil 7 understood Resident Evil more than any game did from Nemesis. Resident Evil 7 went back to basics and gave us a horror experience that we needed because Resident Evil was suffering big time and it needed a comeback. And the fact that this now introduces a brand new character with no skills, there's no super secret agent here who can do twizzly backflips or punch boulders. There's none of that shite. You are playing with a guy who is literally just trying to find out what happened to his girlfriend. No glitz, no glamour. That is it. That is the isolated story of Resident Evil Biohazard. The thing of beauty with this game is it's not only a fantastic survival horror game, it is by far the best horror experience Resident Evil has ever offered us. And to me, because of that horror experience, it is up there with Evil Within, in my opinion. I do love those games. And I would put this up there with Resident Evil 2. I'm going to give this an S, because this is probably what got me back into it. And I don't think if I played this one and loved it as much, I'd even be playing the other one. So I've got to give it to Resident Evil 7 for just being an absolutely phenomenal game. So yeah, I'm going to give it an S, I think. I think it's top tier for me.
I do disagree in some points. I don't feel that the sustenance was here when it came to the story of this. It was very much, it raised more questions than it answered throughout the entire thing, and we never really got an explanation as to what the cause, what the reason for the events that we went through were. I'm not a massive fan of first-player games, but I know that this was directly competing with the likes of The Evil Within, Outlast, Until Dawn, I think it is. A lot of horror games that give people the scares, and that was what it did well. It was a scary game. Like, the jump scares weren't predictable. You didn't know what was coming around every corner, and it did that really well. I would go to A, but I couldn't quite give it an S.
We will meet at A then. We will put it up there at A. With what you were saying, though, in terms of maybe not knowing where the storyline was going, I don't think that was unintentional, because I think that's where Village comes in. Village did to Biohazard what 4 did to Nemesis, and that was not make it bad, but make it an action game. Now,
yeah,
for me, that's not a bad thing. Village took a lot from Resident Evil 4. A lot. Like, I didn't realise how much it took from it until I played the remake of 4. And it did it well, to be honest. It did it really, really, really well. My biggest love of Resident Evil Village is that it finishes Ethan's story quite well. So, in terms of, you know, that emotional connection to characters, Ethan's finish and Ethan's ending was really, really good. And it's also there's also, I don't think it's a chance or but by choice sort of thing that Ethan was the only person to ever do 2 games back to back. I think that shows how well these 2 games belong together. So I find it hard to separate the two, but I do think Village is a funner game, but I think Resident Evil Biohazard is the better experience. So I'm going to have to give Village an A because I do think it's way better than the original 4. I don't know. I think it's a little bit better than the original ones. Do you know what I mean? I think it has more relevancy to Resident Evil because it has got the games back on track and is running with it. That's the point. That's like where we're going to go next with 9. So yeah, Resident Evil Village for me probably would go A tier. What do you think, Bane?
So yeah, an amazing game in all aspects. It did very much become an action game, but sort of made that in its own right. It retained the fear factor that they'd tried so hard to get back into. Like, I remember walking into the creepy dollhouse in Village, and honest to God, I kind of wanted to go to Asda and buy some fucking nappies.
Yeah, it's so good, wasn't it? It's so good. How's it been a V-Day or something?
It was horrendous. Like, combat-wise, there was a good variety of guns. Chrissy's part was minimal, so you never felt too overpowered, and that's what I liked about this. You didn't feel overpowered, and it's like, yeah, very comparative to Resident Evil 4, but Resident Evil 4, you felt like you were a one-man army.
Yeah.
You don't feel like that in this. You felt like random guy that had no business being there but is just there, which is exactly how the story starts you off. You're not supposed to be there at all.
No.
I would happily agree with you on A.
Yeah. Another thing that I quite liked what they did with Village was then they released a third person, which that game is, by the way, 10 times better in third than it is in first. Right, last and not least, but at time of recording to this video, we have the latest Resident Evil, and that is...
I'm going to start with this one, mate.
And that is Resident Evil 4's remake. Bane, take it away. What do you think, my friend?
This is quite possibly the greatest game I have ever played.
Oh my God.
It takes everything from its original and builds upon it. The lore scratches way beyond what the original did. They've got rid of that annoying voice acting. The combat system, they've introduced parry mechanic into there as well.
Yeah.
So you've now got something further to defend yourself. I thought, this game isn't going to scare me. I know everything that's coming. And it still had me shaking. It's had my hair stood on end, what hair I have got. And honest to God, if I was to introduce anybody to the world of Resident Evil, it would probably be this, if not 2. So I'm going to go with S.
This is an S tier game for you, is it? It's up there, Resident Evil 2, is it?
Yes, 100%.
So, like I said, everything I didn't like about the original one, the fact that the controls were dated, the fact that his relationship with Ashley is controversial. There are things in this that I must say I absolutely love. Again, as a survival horror fan, this does survival horror quite well. As a Resident Evil fan, this adds cheesy bits in quite well. There's nothing in this game, in my humble opinion, that makes me go, ugh. Maybe apart from how long it is. It took me 10 hours to finish it. And I'm just like, that's great, but I can't see myself running this through as many times as maybe Village, just because of its length. Yeah, is it as good as 2?
I think it's better.
I think it's better, if I'm being honest.
If we had a Z rank, I'd put it in Z rank.
There's nothing realistically I can say that I'd want them to change. But yeah, I think overall there's nothing I could really say bad about this. So I'm going to have to agree on the S rank on the Resident Evil 4 remake because it's absolutely phenomenal. Right, Bane, from top to bottom, before we go, we have got Resident Evil 2 remake and Resident Evil 4 remake in at S rank. At A rank, we've got the remaster of Resident Evil 0. We've got Resident Evil 7 and Village. At B, we've got all the original 3. We've got 1, 2, and 3 running at. At C, we've got Resident Evil 4, Veronica 0, and the Resident Evil 3 remake. At D, we have Resident Evil 6. And last, and definitely least, we have an E, which is Resident Evil 5. So there we go. We're making some more content on Resident Evil 4 in the upcoming weeks, so make sure you keep an eye on that. But yeah, Bane, thank you so much for joining me, my man. This has been an insanely tight list of games. But yeah, until next time, guys, check out another video, and I'll see you soon. Peace.